All right, guys. So with the season coming to an end, we're going to go ahead and take a look ahead to my way too early 2024 preseason college football top 25 rankings. Now, this is all subject to change. It's going to change, no doubt. I mean, we're going to have guys transfer, guys in the transfer portal commit to teams that are on this list or really close to this list. We're going to have guys opt to go pro, guys pull out of the draft. So by the time I get to my even way too early rankings, this is going to be completely different, this list. Heck, this list even changed right before I made this list. Liberty was not on my list because their quarterback, who's arguably their best player, Kaidon Salter, had entered the transfer portal right before I made this ranking. He pulled out of the transfer portal, said he's coming back. So that changed it like that. And then there's some teams we'll get to that are maybe still playing that I think guys are going pro, but they haven't said they're going pro. So we'll see. But before we go ahead and get into it, let's dive into my honorable mentions real fast. All right, a few teams here. First off, Miami. Miami could make this list depending on what quarterback they ultimately get in the transfer portal. There's a few options here. Taulia Tagovailoa, Tua's little brother, is in the transfer portal trying to get that extra year of eligibility. I think he's an option. Also, another slept-on option, Cam Ward. I know he has declared he's going pro, but he hasn't signed with an agent yet, which means technically he still could come back. So that's definitely a possibility there. Next up, honorable mention, SMU, which SMU I actually had at number 25 before I took them out for Liberty. SMU has their quarterback coming back, Preston Stone, have added a ton of pieces in the transfer portal, one of the top 10 transfer portal classes, but they're headed to the ACC, going to be kind of tough, but I think they have the makings to make a run in the ACC their first year. Next up, Appalachian State. All right, so Appalachian State actually has an outsider shot this year at making the college football playoff. They play Liberty. That's probably their toughest test. If they can beat Liberty, I think they'll go undefeated, might sneak into that playoff. Next up, Kansas. All right, you got Jalon Daniels coming back. The big question here is, can he stay healthy? And that's been a big question here. They're losing Bean, but you have Daniels coming back. If he can stay healthy, Kansas is a top 25 team. The problem is he's not shown he can stay healthy. Next up, Kansas State. You're losing Will Howard, but the good news is they benched him half the time this year anyway for the backup quarterback. That quarterback's coming back. He's going to be a force. And Kansas State, probably a top 25 team. I think they'll sneak in by the end of the year, most likely. Next up, Oklahoma. All right, Oklahoma losing their best player, Dillon Gabriel. Jackson Arnold, is he the answer? I'm not a huge believer in Brent Venables. A lot of the games he won this year were because of Dillon Gabriel. You look at last season, Dillon Gabriel was hurt, and they sucked. So I'm a little questionable on Oklahoma. Next up in the honorable mentions, we got a few more. Wisconsin. All right, Luke Fickell, one of the best head coaches in the nation, finally gets his quarterback in. Tyler Van Dyke from Miami, which is a good quarterback, very underrated, I think. He was a little injured this year, but go back to a few years ago, Tyler Van Dyke was in the first-round draft pick conversation. I think Wisconsin will be good. Two more honorable mentions here. Rutgers. All right, Rutgers looked really good in their bowl game. They have a ton coming back. Running back, which led the Big Ten in rushing, is back. I think Rutgers will be a force next year. Greg Schiano does a good job there. Last up in our honorable mentions, Georgia Tech. All right, Georgia Tech, really a pretty good year this year. I think they will be good next year. They've got their quarterback and running back coming back. Haynes King, Texas A&M transfer at quarterback, is really impressive. He's a runner. He's a passer. He's a runner. He's a track star. He's pretty good. And I think Georgia Tech will be a force. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into my top 25. Let me get a drink real quick. All right, so number 25, starting off, Liberty. I know they are fresh off a butt kicking in their bowl game versus Oregon, but Kaidon Salter's coming back. And looking at their schedule, like I said, if they can beat Appalachian State, that's their toughest test. If they beat Appalachian State, they're going undefeated. They've got Jamey Chadwell, one of the more slept-on head coaches in the nation, I think. Really surprised he didn't get a Power 5 job this year, but I think he's holding out for the right job. Liberty, number 25. Number 24, Florida State. All right, so Florida State has the potential to move up these rankings depending on who they add in the transfer portal. But we saw against Georgia, they have a lot of work to do as far as bringing in more guys from the transfer portal. They brought in 2 5-stars already, Marvin Jones from Georgia, DJ Uiagalelei from Oregon State. And if they can add more in the transfer portal, they'll move up. But right now, that's all they've got. So if you add them to what you had against Georgia, plus a few freshmen, that's not a very good football team. So if they don't add anything, I think they're going to start 0-3. They've got a kind of tough stretch at the beginning of the year. 3 losses, looking at Georgia Tech, Memphis, and Notre Dame. Could be a tough schedule, but I think Florida State has the capability of moving up. 23, Syracuse. All right, Fran Brown has done a great job already on the recruiting trail, bringing in guys from the transfer portal, has brought in some Georgia receivers with him, which should give Ohio State quarterback transfer Kyle McCord some serious weapons. They have a really favorable schedule. Look at Syracuse's schedule. You know what I'm talking about. They have a sleeper outside chance at making the college football playoff. I know that sounds insane, but look at their schedule. There's not a non-winnable game on there. I think their only loss is going to be the NC State, which we'll get to later. Syracuse should be a top 25 team next year. Kyle McCord's legit. Number 22, Iowa. All right, so we know their defense is always legit, but the question mark is that offense. We're going to see who Ferentz brings in as his offensive coordinator. I don't know yet, but at quarterback, they've got Michigan transfer Cade McNamara. Was injured this year, but I think if Cade McNamara is healthy, Iowa's going to make the playoff probably, and, well, possibly. We'll see about their schedule on how that goes. But Cade McNamara led Michigan to a playoff before. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. If you bring him into Iowa, probably the best quarterback Iowa's had in the last 20 years, arguably. If he can stay healthy, I think Iowa has a chance here. All right, number 21, Michigan. Okay, so go ahead and put an asterisk next to Michigan because this is all dependent on – I'm assuming J.J. McCarthy's going pro. From what I've been told, J.J. McCarthy and Jim Harbaugh are kind of a package pair when it comes to the pros. If Harbaugh leaves, McCarthy's leaving. If Harbaugh comes back, J.J. McCarthy's coming back. We'll see. If they come back, this team's a top 5 team, no doubt, if both of them come back. But I think Harbaugh's gone. I think that means J.J. McCarthy's gone, which means you're going to have a lot of missing pieces on the offense that you're going to have to fix. And the real question is, depending on who they hire, do you promote Sherrone Moore? That way you can kind of keep the defense in-house because they've got a lot of defensive players coming back, but offensively, losing your quarterback and running back combo is going to be a detriment to the team. So if they hire from the outside, you'll probably see a max exodus on the team, lose a bunch of guys, but Michigan definitely has the biggest chance out of any of these teams to climb up. Number 20, Washington. All right, so Kalen DeBoer, their head coach, has earned my respect. All right, he seems like he's the next guy in line to be one of the top 5 head coaches in the nation. They're losing a lot here, though. Michael Penix Jr. is gone, Rome Odunze, Dylan Johnson. They're going to be losing a bunch here. Washington, I know they're in the championship this year, but can just anybody come in and run that offense like Michael Penix does? I'm not sure. Now, they've got Will Rogers coming in, who has had a lot of success at Mississippi State. Now, they could shoot up if Will Rogers hits, but I don't know. We're going to have to see what they do in the transfer portal after the championship's over with. 19, LSU, losing the Heisman quarterback, Daniels. Who's going to be their quarterback? Is it going to be the Vandy transfer? Is it going to be Nussmeier? We'll see. Brian Kelly's got my benefit of the doubt. He's a pretty good head coach. And you look at this year, though, that's why I'm a little questionable. They had Daniels and still had 3 losses this year. So I'm not sure where they wind up in the pecking order, but they should be a top 25 team nonetheless. All right, 18, Tennessee. All right, Tennessee fans, you know I'm not the biggest Tennessee lover here. All right, I've been beat over the head all year with comments by Tennessee fans about being a hater. But you finally, hey, I ranked you here at number 18 this year. I was right. Preseason, I told you they should have benched Milton for Nico. They didn't listen to me. They told me they were going to come back and look at – I have a comment. I'll pull it up on another video. But in my preseason rankings last year, I ranked Tennessee somewhere in the 20s. Can't remember exactly where. Somebody put in the comment section, I'm going to come back at the end of the year with Joe Milton stats to prove you wrong. Long story short, he never came back. So, anyways, 18, Tennessee. I think you've got the better quarterback in here. Nico. Tennessee has a pretty favorable schedule here. They should be a top 25 team next year. Should be better, probably top 15-ish. And I think they'll be good next year. All right, 17, Memphis. I know it's kind of a high ranking for Memphis probably, but looking at their schedule, I think this is going to be your group of 5 representation in the college football playoff. You honestly have the potential for 2 teams because I think Memphis and Liberty or Appalachian State is going to go undefeated. 2 of those teams are, which means if all falls right with, you know, multiple Power 5 schools getting 3 losses, you could see 2 group of 5 teams sneak in to the college football playoff. The reason that could happen is because Memphis plays Florida State in the preseason week 2, I think. And I think Memphis wins that game if they go into it right now. Memphis, fresh off a win over Iowa State, had a really good year this year, only lost the top 25 teams, lost by 7 to Missouri. and that was a top 10 Missouri team. I think Memphis is going to be legit next year. Their quarterback Henigan is back. Look for Memphis to make a run next year, probably be a top 10 team by the end of the year. 16, West Virginia. All right, so their head coach got himself off the hot seat with a pretty good year this year. Only preseason loss, non-Big 12-wise, was to Penn State. Not a bad loss by any means. That's a top 10 team. Their quarterback, Garrett Greene, is back. He's going to be the best player on the field in a lot of games. And, when you have a dual-threat quarterback on the field, that gives you a chance because if all things break down, he can just Jalen Milroe it and take off and run. If you've seen him play, he is pretty impressive. If not, go look at his highlights. He is pretty good, and he talks that ish too. But West Virginia, I think, will be a top 20 team next year. Should be pretty good. And the Big 12, they're losing Texas and Oklahoma, which means there's more favorable schedules out there. You know what I mean? 15, Oklahoma State. All right, they've got pretty much everybody coming back next year. One of the more surprising teams this year. I know they had ups and downs, some really questionable games where they got spanked by UCF. They lost to South Alabama, but they still made the Big 12 championship. Mike Gundy, top 10 coach. And they've got everybody coming back. Bowman, quarterback's coming back. I could still see them trying to make an improvement at quarterback. But the good news is you have Ollie Gordon coming back, best running back in the nation. Oklahoma State should be a force next year. 14, Louisville. All right, Jeff Brom, one of the better coaches in the nation as well, has kind of proven that he's a top 25 team every year no matter what happens. And at Louisville, they've got some good pieces coming in the transfer portal. They currently have a top 5 transfer portal class. And they do have to replace some pieces, but you saw this year what he's capable of doing in his first year. Let's see what he can do as his second year. I think he can improve Louisville. All right, 13, Arizona. Coming to the Big 12, one of the Big 12 favorites probably at the moment for next season anyway. Their coach has done a great job there, Jedd Fisch. Surprised he didn't leave this year. I thought he might get the A&M job. He didn't. But they lost, I think, 3 games this year, ended up being a top 20 team. You've got Noah Fafita coming back, their quarterback. Once they made that switch, they were rolling after that. And like I said, the Big 12 is going to be a little down as far as you're losing Texas and Oklahoma, so you don't have that top dog you just can't beat. So Arizona has a chance at winning the Big 12 and making the playoff. Number 12, Notre Dame. I'm not the biggest Marcus Freeman believer, but this team he's put together next year is going to be pretty good. Riley Leonard coming in from Duke. Duke quarterback this year, if he stays healthy, Duke's a top 15 team. And you pair that with Notre Dame's roster, I think this team has top 10 potential. Now, that's a lot being said. That's if Riley Leonard can stay healthy because he hasn't been able to do that so far. But if he can, Notre Dame will be a top 10 team and be in the playoff. Number 11, Utah. All right, so I thought they would have made the playoff this year if they had Cam Rising. Cam Rising was out all year. Otherwise, they probably won the Pac-12. I think Cam Rising is legit. Kyle Whittingham, their coach, always wins. Now, they weren't the best team this year, but they were without Cam Rising, like I said, which is a Heisman hopeful. If you remember, think back to his Rose Bowl performance last season. Really great performance. They dominated USC a couple times. Cam Rising coming back to Utah, they have a chance to win the Big 12. Number 10, Clemson. I know Dabo Sweeney gets a lot of hate now because Clemson is down, so-called. But looking back at the metrics this year, they were this close to being a 10-win team this season. And I think they will be next year because Florida State's not going to be as good as they were this season. I think Clemson will be legit. You still got the same quarterback, Cade Klubnik. You still got Dabo, so you got a chance to win. Now, he's going to have to embrace the transfer portal at some point because they lost the starting safety, for example, to Texas. They've lost a couple other ones. But Clemson has the potential here to be a top 10 team, make it back to the playoff finally for Dabo. All right, number 9, NC State. All right, really surprising team. Their coach wins a bunch of ball games. Really one of the best coaches in the nation. You look at the ratings as far as who has won 8 games consistently over the last few years. He's definitely one of them. They've got a great transfer portal class coming in. Let me pull up a couple names here. All right, so they've got the number 6 transfer portal class right now. Speaking of the transfers they're bringing in, Grayson McCall. You may remember that name, Coastal Carolina quarterback back when they won a bunch of ball games a couple years ago. They're going to be improved, no doubt. But Grayson McCall, you've got Ohio State receiver Noah Waters coming in, and then you have Duke running back Waters coming in. I said Noah Waters for Ohio State. I think it's Rogers. But you got Waters coming in from Duke, the Duke starting running back. So you're bringing in some serious talent to an already pretty good team here. And I think NC State is going to make the playoff, might potentially be undefeated. We'll see. But even if they get one loss, they're still going to be in the playoff next season. Number 8, Oregon. All right, so Oregon could move them up a little bit, but I think they're going to be improved next year. They've already been really good these past couple seasons, but couldn't quite get over the hump. And I'm not the biggest Oregon believer, not the biggest Dan Lanning believer. I think you could throw anybody in that job and they're still going to be good. But props to him this year. He's pulling in Dillon Gabriel, Oklahoma quarterback, arguably one of the best, top 5 players in the nation. Oregon, I think Dillon Gabriel's better than Bo Nix, which means they're going to be improved. They should make the playoff next year looking at their schedule. And this offense is going to be legit. Like I said, Dillon Gabriel coming back. You've got a top receiver coming back. Oregon should be legit. Number 7, Penn State. All right, Penn State and another team we'll get to here in a second probably benefit the most from the expanded playoff because Penn State has been you look at last season, for example, they're probably the 5th best team in the country, but they can't beat Ohio State or Michigan. So they're kind of right on that outside looking in. But the good news for them is you're moving up now. And with the expanded playoff, Penn State has a shot to make that playoff and be a beneficiary. So you can actually get a win or two in the college football playoff. You're bringing in a bunch of people back from this season. Drew Aller, I'm a little questionable on him. He hasn't shown me that much, but you're surrounding him with some better weapons. You've got a good transfer portal class coming in. James Franklin probably is a top 15 coach. And you bring in the Ohio State transfer receiver Fleming, giving Aller a weapon outside. I think Penn State should be pretty good next season. Number 6, Missouri. You are losing your running back, Cody Schrader, but you had a top 10 team this year anyway. Gave Georgia a heck of a run during the regular season. You got Brady Cook back. Like I said, Schrader, their workhorse at running back, is gone, but you bring in Marcus Collins from Georgia State, a top 10 rusher in the nation. I think Missouri is going to be really good next year. You look at their schedule, they should be in the playoff. Number 5, Ole Miss, the number 1 transfer portal class. Lane Kiffin is loading up. He's cooking in the transfer portal. And you've got Jaxson Dart back. You did lose Quinshon Judkins yesterday to the transfer portal. Ole Miss running back, led the ACC in rushing this year, I believe. But I think you can throw anybody back there. They're still going to rush for 1,000 yards at least. But look at this defense he's putting together from the transfer portal. They are stacked. Walter Nolan, to name a few, from Texas A&M, 5-star recruit. But Ole Miss is loading up here. I think they'll be a top 5 team. This is the other team I think that benefits the most from playoff expansion. Similar to Penn State, Ole Miss the past couple years under Kiffin has been right there, but can't beat the top teams in Georgia and Alabama. But next year is your chance. They're going all in. They've put all their chips on the table. Let's see if they can make a run. Number 4, Ohio State. All right, good news for Ohio State is if J.J. McCarthy and Jim Harbaugh are gone, that means you can finally beat Michigan, I think. Ohio State will probably be looking at the schedules next year. I think by playoff time, Ohio State will be the number 1 seed because I think they'll go undefeated. Their toughest game probably going to be Oregon because, like I said, I think they beat Michigan next year. And I think they'll beat Oregon. You bring in Will Howard at quarterback. I'm not the biggest believer in Will Howard, but he has won a Big 12 championship before at Kansas State, so props to him. You are losing some key pieces, but I think that defense is going to be back intact for the most part. And it looks like you're probably going to bring Travion Henderson back, the running back. If not, I think Judkins lands at Ohio State. Ohio State should be good next year. They should be fine, and that's why I've got them at number 4. All right, so number 3, we've got 3 SEC teams at the top here. Number 3, Texas. All right, you're bringing back Quinn Ewers. You've got some impressive transfer portal guys coming in on defense. For example, the safety from Clemson, but also you bring a lot of that defense back. I know you're losing the D tackles and Sweat, but you are bringing some key pieces back. You are losing it on offense as well, though. You know what I mean? You're losing Brooks. You're losing Sanders. You're losing Worthy. You're losing Whittington. But they have loaded up in the portal. You got Quinn Ewers back, so you got a shot. And they beat Alabama last year. I think they're going to improve next year. Should be a top 3 team. Number 2, Georgia. You've got Carson Beck coming back. You do have to replace Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. But Georgia is a machine at this point. Probably could have won the championship if they made the playoff this year. Who are we kidding? But lost to Alabama. Georgia, though, should be a bona fide team this year. They do have probably the toughest schedule in the nation, though. Looking at their schedule, you've got Clemson in the preseason. You have Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. That schedule is brutal for Georgia. I don't see how they make it through that unscathed. If they do, props to them. But the good news is you can lose 2 losses now and still make the playoff. But again, Clemson, Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas. That's 3 away games at top 5 teams. Another top 10 matchup. Georgia got a brutal schedule, but if they can somehow make it through that with only 1 or 2 losses, they're going to be in business. All right, number 1, Alabama. The reason I have Alabama at number 1 is because I think they have the best player in the nation coming back, Jalen Milroe. I know a lot of people aren't impressed with Jalen Milroe's throwing ability, but he didn't, in my opinion, have a bona fide top receiver this year. You know, one of those big targets you can just chunk it up to and let go to work. But the good news is he's a heck of an athlete. All right, similar, like I said, with Garrett Greene in West Virginia. He's the best athlete on the field. Jalen Milroe is going to be the best player on the field in any situation. He beat Georgia this year, almost beat Michigan, even with the bad center, the bad snaps. Alabama, going to be your number 1 team next year. But them and Georgia probably could flip-flop. But looking at it here, we've got, 5 teams from the SEC in the top 6. SEC and Big Ten are going to have a lot of teams in the playoff next year. I'll put out a playoff prediction in a couple weeks or so. I'll have to break down the schedules a little more. But this is my way too early. Sorry, way too early. Top 25. Let me know yours. Who would you add to this list? Who would you take off of this list? Who would you move up or down? Like I said, this is going to change a ton by the time we're even done with next week, probably, depending on who commits where, all that crap. But it's going to be crazy. Who would you add to this list? Who would you take off? Let me know. Comment down below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe.